everyone. So in this session, we're going to be looking at the remilitarisation of the Rhineland. We'll have a look at how Hitler's rearming process led to this, how it again defied the Treaty of Versailles, and what the Allies did about it. So let's have a look then at actually what happened in the Rhineland, and we'll have a look at where the Rhineland is if you're unsure about that. So it was the 7th of March 1936, and Hitler marched 22,000 soldiers into the Rhineland, and this was the demilitarized zone of Germany bordering France. So if you remember when we had a look at the Treaty of Versailles, we talked about the Rhineland being that buffer zone. Okay, so it's the zone in the middle of Germany and France, and the reason that it was demilitarized was so that France didn't feel threatened by Germany. Okay, so if France had, if Germany, sorry, had troops in the Rhineland, it would have been a really easy area for them to then use to invade France. And because Germany had invaded France in 1871 and in 1914, France wanted that sense of security, that there was nothing between them and Germany and no way for Germany to get in and invade again. So this was banned by the Treaty of Versailles, and that forbade any German soldiers from going within 50 kilometres of the River Rhine. So the reason it's called the Rhineland is because the River Rhine runs through it. So the decision to send in troops was a deliberate challenge. Now, remember what I said in the last video, that in this time, from in the early 1930s, Hitler had been testing the waters. He'd been pushing the boundaries to see how far he could go. And by the end of 1935, after the Anglo-German Naval Agreement, he was quite confident that he would receive no backlash from from breaking the Treaty of Versailles further. So this was a deliberate attempt to challenge the Treaty of Versailles to see whether he could get away with it. So it was also a clear violation of the Treaty of Locarno as well. So we're going to have a look at how Britain and France would respond to the treaty being challenged in this way. So this is the location of the Rhineland. So we can see here, this line here is the River Rhine, and this is the demilitarized zone, the buffer zone in between France and Germany, to give France that sense of security. Okay, so the river itself, now this is why the Rhineland was used. The river itself makes a natural defense against invasion. The Rhineland remained in Germany, right? So this wasn't part of the 10% of territory that was taken away from Germany. It still belonged to them. The only clause here to do with this is that troops, weapons, or fortifications, so nothing military related, was allowed in the area. So Hitler knew that in order to gain Lebensraum, which was one of his foreign policy aims, and it means living space. Okay, so in order to gain Lebensraum in the east, he would have to invade other countries. And remember in the last video, we talked about how British politicians thought that Hitler wasn't intent on war. This is a direct contradiction of that. So this will most likely provoke a response from countries like Britain and France, remember, who were meant to be at the forefront of the peacekeeping organizations. So Hitler had to start defending Germany's borders in the west, and the remilitarization of the Rhineland was key to this. So he thought, I'm going to have to go and invade other countries. Britain and France probably aren't going to be too happy about that. So I need to make sure that if they try and invade, I've got troops on that border to stop that invasion. Okay, so in 1935, France and the USSR, which is what we now know as Russia, signed the Franco-Soviet Pact. Okay, so France is on the east of Germany, USSR oh, sorry, other way around. France is on the west of Germany and the USSR is on the east of Germany. This is why I'm a history teacher, not a geography teacher. An agreement to support each other if either was attacked by Germany. Okay, so Hitler used this pact to claim that Germany was under threat, having enemies on both the western and eastern fronts. So the reason that they did that is, if we just imagine very, very simply, we've got France, Germany and Russia. If Germany were to attack France, Russia would attack Germany, and then Germany would be fighting this war on two fronts, okay, and two sides. And I'm going to come back to the war in two fronts bit when we talk about the Nazi-Soviet pact, which is one of the final parts of the course. So he responds to this pact in self-defense by sending these 22,000 troops into the Rhineland on the 7th of March 1936. Now, the reception that the Nazis received when they went into the Rhineland is so important, because Hitler used it as propaganda. He used it to show that people were celebrating this. He used it as an excuse to be able to invade further, namely Czechoslovakia. So troops were greeted by civilians who gave them flowers. So even though this looks like it should be, sounds like it should be a really bad thing, remember, these civilians were actually German, okay? This isn't an invasion. He is going into his own territory. But the reception that he received still could be interpreted and used as propaganda. So Hitler had been relying on such a welcome. Many of the troops had arrived on bicycle and there was no air support, right? So Hitler knew that his army was still small, and even instructed his generals that they were to retreat if they were greeted by any resistance. I want to put big, big, big red flags around this statement. Okay, many historians see the remilitarisation of the Rhineland as the pivotal moment in this entire story, because a lot of them argue that if Britain and France and the Allies had actually stopped Hitler at this point, this is when he could have been stopped. Okay, he's directly contradicted the Treaty of Versailles with an army that he shouldn't even have. He's done something that he was explicitly told that they had every opportunity and right here to go in and stop this from happening, and they didn't. Okay, and we talked about the Hitler's confidence building in 1933 to 1935. If it was building then, it's gone through the roof now, because he has directly contradicted what they've told him not to do. So this is a photograph showing German troops entering the Rhineland in March 1936. So that just shows us what we've just been talking about. So these women here giving the troops flowers, obviously celebrating. So then why didn't they get involved and make what could have been a really, really important decision in history? So many Britons felt that Germany had the right to protect their own borders, so they shouldn't have to intervene. So when they're talking about this, remember, we've got the alleged threat from the Franco-Soviet Pact. In reality, the Franco-Soviet Pact will have been signed because both sides could actually see Hitler building up his weapons, and both sides did want to actually defend themselves against him. But obviously it played into his hands. British troops were already busy dealing with the Italian invasion of Abyssinia. So Abyssinia worked very well for Hitler in this case. The Depression had hit Britain hard. The nation could not afford, literally not afford, to get involved in foreign affairs. Many people believe that Hitler was simply reclaiming what was rightfully his. And what else is important here is that the British thought that the Treaty of Versailles was too harsh on Germany. So that ties in with that point there, that he was reclaiming what was rightfully his and it should never have been taken away from him in the first place. So why didn't France react then? So politicians in France were busy fighting a general election. So it's like we said, things that are going on at home in directly influencing them is what's important. No one wanted to be responsible for plunging France into a war, as this would lose them votes. So it's all political. Much of the French army had been moved to Tunisia in case, again, the situation in Abyssinia needed intervention. French generals believed that the German army entering the Rhineland was much larger and better equipped than it actually was, right? Now, remember, this will have been because in 1935, when Hitler had a rally to show off his armed forces. Okay, so they'll have probably thought, well, that's only a portion of it. We can't afford to risk anything, so we can't go in there after them. The League of Nations, again, focusing on Mussolini in Abyssinia, you know, worthy. And this is what Hitler says about 1936 when he was looking back afterwards. If the French had taken any action, we would have been easily defeated. Our resistance would have been over in a few days. Okay, so that perfectly just sums up what I was saying before. This was the key moment or opportunity to stop Hitler. And it was missed by everybody who had the power to do it. So could he have been stopped? Army generals had warned Hitler that if France decided to uphold the Treaty of Versailles, that German army was not big enough to fight. Financial ministers advised him that if he failed, Germany would have to pay crippling fines. Hitler simply was not in the position to fight. So sending his army into the Rhineland was a huge gamble, and it absolutely paid off. Okay. So the remilitarisation of the Rhineland was a very significant step in the road to war. So again, like we've said, Hitler's got this newly found confidence that he could do as he pleased. He turned his attention to considering how he might get around the other terms of the Treaty of Versailles, because who was going to stop him from doing that, such as the forbidden Anschluss, the union with Austria. And remember, he had a failed attempt at this after the Dollfuss affair in 1934. But now his army was much stronger, and he was no longer concerned about meeting resistance. Britain and France had started to rearm. Okay, so they obviously are starting to see Hitler as a threat, so they're starting to do something about it as well. France have treated with several Eastern European countries, saying that it would protect them from Nazi invasion. However, it now turned its attention to its own defences. The relationship between France and Britain was tested. The French felt that they could not rely on Britain, probably quite true at this point. To please France, Britain signed another agreement which strengthened the Locarno Treaty by reaffirming that they will protect each other and Belgium if Germany attacked. Now, this is really important. So Mussolini decided that Hitler was a force to be reckoned with and agreed to sign a pact, the Rome-Berlin Axis. Now, remember, one of the reasons that the Dollfuss affair didn't work was because Mussolini was on the side of Dollfuss and wasn't on the side of Hitler. Mussolini and Hitler together are dangerous. They also worked together to send weapons to Spain, where there was a civil war. And this allowed Hitler to develop and test his weapons and allowed his men to gain experience of war. So all of these signs show us, and this wasn't a secret, which I want you to remember when we look at appeasement. This all shows that Hitler was gearing up for war. He was ready to defend his western borders, and he could then concentrate on Lebensraum, living space, in the east. So, Winston Churchill. Now, Winston Churchill wasn't the Prime Minister in Britain at this time. The Prime Minister was Neville Chamberlain. Churchill only becomes the Prime Minister in 1940, but he's very active in politics. And this is taken from his speech in the House of Commons on the 26th of March, 1936. He had previously been the Chancellor of the Exchequer and the Minister of Defence. He says, the violation of the Rhineland is serious from the point of view of the menace to which it exposes Holland, Belgium and France. When it is fortified, it will be a barrier across Germany's front door, which will leave her free to sally out eastwards and southward by the back door. And that is exactly what the remilitarisation of the Rhineland does. It allows Hitler to remove the threat from the west and concentrate on the east. And we'll see what happens next as he looks to complete Anschluss, to take over the Sudetenland and then Czechoslovakia. And we'll see how Neville Chamberlain allowed that to happen through his policy of appeasement. So thank you again for tuning into this video, and I will hope to see you in the next one.